Today I'm going to talk about the taxation of alcohol in Sweden. Taxation is a type of market failure and can be defined as failure of the price mechanism to achieve an optimum allocation of resources. An indirect tax is a tax imposed by the government directly on spending. Examples are sales tax, land tax, and payroll tax. Sweden has among the highest taxes in the world on alcohol, and they're mostly famous for Absolut vodka. Wine and beer between 4.5 to 7% alcohol in them is taxed with 11.2 crowns per liter. The Swedish currency is crowns. And vodka with 40% alcohol in them is taxed with 200.56 crowns per liter. Every kind of alcohol with an alcohol percentage of 3.5 or above is sold by a monopoly by the name of Systembolaget. However, even though the supplier is a monopoly, it is not the greatest supplier in Sweden. Statistics showed that Swedes brought home 3 million liters of alcohol from foreign countries. At the same time period, Systembolaget only sold 2.85 million liters. It is due to the high tax on alcohol in Sweden and the fact that neighboring countries such as Estonia and Latvia sell the alcohol much cheaper. Due to the high tax, many parallel markets are formed within the country. A parallel market, also known as black market, refers to the unofficial economic activity in an economy. In 2004, a law was imposed so that people could get put into jail for bringing too much alcohol back from other countries. The tax in Sweden is high due to a number of reasons. The violence of people under the influence of alcohol and the property they destroy, the health problems that come with alcohol, and sometimes even death. Sweden was considering to lower their tax on hard liquor by 40% and their wine by 15%. This was estimated to increase alcohol consumption by 0.35 liters per person. Accordingly, to a study made in Sweden in 2002, this was estimated to cause 289 additional deaths, 1,627 additional assaults, and 1.6 million additional sickness absences. Alcohol is an example of an economic good. An economic good is a good or service that is scarce. Alcohol in Sweden has an ad valorem tax imposed on them by the government. Ad valorem tax is an indirect tax imposed by the government whose amount of tax depends on the value of the good or service. In this graph, the supply and demand with ad valorem tax in Sweden is represented. Before the ad valorem tax was imposed, the price was at P and the quantity was at Q. However, as the government imposed an ad valorem tax, the supply shifted from S to S plus ad valorem tax, and the price changed from P to P1, and the quantity changed from Q to Q1. This created a new equilibrium at E1 as compared to the previous one at E. The tax was imposed due to the fact that people were buying too much alcohol, and there were many concerns regarding alcohol, such as the things mentioned earlier: health problems, violence, death, and damage to society. People had to start paying more for alcohol, and therefore they did not buy as much. As the price increased, many parallel markets formed. People started to travel to other countries in order to buy high quantities of liquor. Some people created websites where one could buy some of their imports. This is a type of parallel markets. The parallel market also sold alcohol to minors, which gave them even higher revenue. When people saw how much the parallel market gained, they started to join the market, much like in an oligopoly. The parallel markets are one of the negative externalities. An externality is an effect of production or consumption that is not taken into account by the producers or consumers that affects the utility or costs of other producers or consumers. The parallel markets led to much more adolescent drinking, which then could lead to adult alcoholism. People found substitutes for alcohol, such as drugs. However, there were also positive externalities. The money from all the tax could be spent on several things, such as healthcare, education, restoring damaged good, building new capital, making more public good and public transportation, and improvement of food and water. As GDP per capita increased, an economic growth occurred. People found substitutes for alcohol, such as drugs. However, there were also positive externalities. The money from all the tax could be spent on several things such as healthcare, education, restoring damaged good, building new capital, making more public good and public transportation, and improvement of food and water. As GDP per capita increased, economic growth occurred, and as the education and healthcare increased, the standard of living improved. Therefore, an economic development was able to occur in Sweden. An economic development occurs in a country when there is an increase in real GDP per capita, plus an improvement in the standard of living. Since Systembolaget is a monopoly is a type of market structure where there is a single supplier that supplies the whole industry. It is most likely to be inefficient, and since there are no competitors, the company does not have to cut prices. Therefore, the prices are high and the output low. With the tax added, the prices become even higher. Because of this, there is a welfare loss. Imposing a tax on alcohol also has other implications. For example, it makes sure that alcoholics drink less, which might help them to get on with their life, which would then lead to an increase in labor, which is one of the 4 factors of production. People in general will drink much less, and are most likely to spend money on other goods or services, or maybe spend more time at work, or even be more efficient at working. This would contribute to other companies, and would most likely also lead to an increase in GDP per capita. However, if the taxation would be lowered, there would be a decrease in the import of alcohol, and there would be less parallel markets. People would still drink less alcohol, and most likely because they've gotten used to it. And the alcohol price would still be high, even though not as high as before. If this was the case, both the stakeholders and consumers would benefit from this. If Sweden would want to make the best out of their tax, they would firstly have to find an equilibrium somewhere between the current price because of the tax and the price without tax, with a maximum amount of people buy from the monopoly instead of importing or buying from parallel markets. Secondly, they would have to increase the tax of bringing in alcohol from other countries, and harsher laws concerning dealers of illegal alcohol, as well as increase the protection against parallel markets. In the short run, having a high tax will make people do many things in order to get alcohol. For example, buy from a parallel market, import in from other countries, or even go to other countries just to get it. This also increases the chance of minors getting hold of alcohol, and even crimes. However, in the long run, people get tired of going back and forth between countries in order to find alcohol. They also get tired of having to find a dealer to buy from, and they get more used to not drinking as much alcohol, which would help the future. People would also buy more from Systembolaget, which would stop them from buying a high amount of alcohol in one go. And the money spent on the alcohol would then go to the country itself, instead of other countries. This would also lead to an increase in GDP per capita in Sweden. In conclusion, the taxation of alcohol in Sweden had a range of externalities, some of them negative and some of them positive. Positive externalities far outweigh the negative ones and make major changes, such as an increase in the Human Development Index and an increase in GDP per capita. This would mean that the taxation helps Sweden as a whole, instead of just individual parts of it, and it fulfills one of the 5 economic objectives. However, Sweden should lower their tax in order to get the optimum amount of customers. However, there are still flaws in that as well. But if Sweden was to decrease their tax slightly to the point where the actual amount of alcohol bought in Sweden was higher than that one bought illegally or imported, they would increase their GDP even more. However, alcohol taxation is a difficult thing to do without having many externalities, expected ones as well as unexpected ones, and there is no easy way to do it. Thank you for your time.